There's something about Disney theme parks that people don't like to talk about. It's supposed to be the safest place that you can go, controlled, carefully designed, almost too perfect to imagine anything going wrong. But over the years, there have been moments, real ones, where things did happen. Accidents that weren't supposed to happen, decisions people wish they could take back, and stories that even decades later still do not sit right. And then there's the other side of it all, the ghost stories, the ones that cast members whisper about after closing time, the things people swear they saw when the park went quiet, the feeling that maybe not everything that happened there ever really left. So today, we're getting into some of the most unsettling stories and hauntings tied to Disney theme parks, some confirmed, some unexplained, and some that fall somewhere in between. Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. And if you have never been here before, I am Kimbyrleigha or Kimbyr, and this is Candidly Kimbyr. Now, if you have been here before, you might notice we have a new set. I have been wanting to change where I was sitting for these videos. So with this topic, I thought it would be great to try out this set for the very first time. But I'm going to jump right in because I think you already know what we're going to be talking about today. It was Disneyland here in Anaheim, California in 1974. An 18-year-old named Deborah Gail Stone was starting what should have been a normal summer job. It was actually her very first day, and she was working inside a brand new attraction in Tomorrowland called America Sings. Have you heard about this? Now, this wasn't a thrill ride. It's actually more of what I would call a cheesy and somewhat annoying animatronic ride, but it is Disney. And that was to be expected, especially in the 1970s. It was the big animal characters singing American songs like Yankee Doodle Dandy. Guests would sit in a theater and watch the show. But it wasn't just any theater. It was a rotating one. The theater rotated between 6 different stages in a circle at the middle of the room. So the guests sat in this circular auditorium that moved around on a track that they couldn't see underneath their seats. Deborah's role that day was very simple: help guide the guests in and out of the theater. Nothing about it sounded dangerous. But what most people don't realize, and didn't at that time, of course, and what Deborah likely did not fully understand yet, was how the ride itself actually worked mechanically. Try to imagine this, and I'm going to try to put a diagram up on the screen as well. The stages themselves stayed still in the middle of that circular theater. And as the seats went around, that meant there was a fixed wall, and right next to it, a moving wall. Between them was a narrow gap, just big enough for a human body to slip into. It wasn't meant for guests, but absolutely reachable for employees working this attraction. Those gaps are where things went wrong. At some point during operation, Deborah was positioned too close to one of those gaps, and as the theater began to rotate, she was pulled into the space between the moving and the fixed walls, and she got trapped. There was no time for her to react, and the ride didn't immediately stop because no one knew what had happened or that anything did happen, especially the guests. And let me add, I did see a YouTube video of this ride, and it's almost pitch black as you move from one lighted stage to the next. You can imagine what occurred to Deborah, and it's horrifying. The rotating begins slowly. She's standing near that seam, and there's no dramatic warning, just motion, and suddenly there's nowhere to go. Once that space closes, there's no pull-away moment. It's not like getting caught in something that you can yank yourself out of. It's force versus a human body. And the ride doesn't immediately stop unless something triggers it to. The cast members nearby did finally realize that something was wrong, and they rushed to respond, attempting to shut the ride down and get help. You'll hear things like, guests heard screaming during the show. There are even videos that are doctored with blood-curdling screams. You'll hear rumors that the ride continued for hours. or that Deborah's long hair was what pulled her inside, or was it her bell bottoms? Some of these rumors say that there are pictures of her death online with lots of blood, her hair caught on a mechanical arm, and her body in pieces. Or that Deborah had just gotten engaged and she was reaching out her arm to show a coworker her ring when her arm got stuck into that gap. There's no verified evidence supporting those claims. However, what is true is that behind the scenes, it became clear this wasn't just a freak accident. It was a design flaw. After her death, the Walt Disney Company made major safety changes, including adding sensors, breakaway walls, and stricter employee boundaries around moving parts, systems that are now standard in their theme parks today. On Facebook, I stumbled upon a post related to this tragic incident, and a former cast member named Stephanie wrote this. I was working at Carnation Main Street that night. After it happened, all of Tomorrowland was closed, and guests were mobbing Main Street trying to leave, which meant we were slammed with people stopping to eat on their way out. We were told that the girl who died was kidding around with an employee in the next theater, and they were slapping each other's hand through the opening near the stage. When the theater began to revolve, her arm got stuck, and she was dragged into the very small opening and killed. The theaters were supposedly changed so that no one could reach all the way through and potentially get a limb stuck in the opening. Very traumatic, right? We're all told to keep smiling for guests, which is hard to do. I believe that would be very hard to do after hearing something so horrifying and not knowing exactly what happened to Deborah. Now, a man named Jeffrey added something. He said, I was dancing in the electrical parade the night it happened. There were hundreds of sympathy cards provided by the park, and almost every employee signed one, and Disneyland mailed them to her parents. Well, it's clear that it's one of these stories that has always lingered, because once you understand exactly how it happened, and I'm sure you do now, it's really hard not to picture it, and even harder to forget it. And this is where the story takes a darker turn, because over the years, cast members and visitors have shared very eerie claims tied to the old attraction, reports of strange presences, unexplained feelings near where the incident happened, and even stories of hearing something that shouldn't be there. A guy named John posted in that same group on Facebook for former cast members and said, back when it was Interventions Building, I knew a few cast members who worked the attraction. One of them had casually commented how after closing, there was one area near the section where the inner and outer stages connected that frequently had a cold spot. I've often wondered if other cast members working the building had ever had any kind of experience they would consider ghostly or paranormal related to the 1974 incident. There are always a lot of rumors about other areas of the park being haunted, but they are, for the most part, not bona fide and mere urban legends, not rooted in any truth. This instance, however, seems to have some actual teeth. In the spirit of the season, I'm curious if any other past cast members have ever had any kind of experience in the building. Would love to hear people's input. Well, John, I wanted to as well. So I searched good old Reddit, which never seems to disappoint. In the Disneyland subreddit, a person said, my mom had friends who were there that day on America Sings when she got crushed. She said they could hear her remain calm until she was out of sight, and then they could hear her screams. Another commenter said, someone I know who worked there on third shift was walking in the underground utilidor area, and there's a portion that you can go up a flight of stairs to access an area for doing repair work on America Sings, which, by the way, was also this Interventions after it was closed and reopened. They said he was walking around that area one night and heard, help me, but saw no one around. I still wondered if it was Deborah Gale Stone imprinted in that area. Well, there's more. After that, there was another comment from someone else that added, I saw the ghost of Debbie Stone while walking along the upper level of Star Wars Launch Bay during the day. It was like a shadow against the wall, but moving as if she was walking past me. And I wasn't moving at the time I saw her, so it definitely wasn't my shadow. It was super creepy, but I'm pretty sure she's harmless. Another poster had recalled that back when America Sings was still Interventions, all of the cast members would write messages to Debbie inside the basement. And they would find small little tasks already done for them, like a chair that was left out in the hallway being pushed back to where it belonged, or cabinets that were left open being closed. Okay, that would freak me out. But of course, I'd also be thankful that my tasks were done, and I guess I would say, thanks, Debbie, I guess. There was one commenter that stood out on Reddit. Their name was Kind of the Best, and they wrote, I worked at Interventions about 20 years ago, and yikes, I feel old. I had transferred in and had worked elsewhere in the park for a few years and had never had anything strange happen to me and really didn't believe in anything. Wow, that changed quick. Back when the building was America Sings, Debbie Stone was killed by getting crushed between the moving walls, and she was still around. The fire alarms and ring stops, the buttons to stop the moving building in case of an emergency, gas cases with alarms on them, before opening, never after, they would get popped off, and a mini alarm on them would sound. Particularly in rehearsals for new cast members, the area where we would control Stitch had a big, heavy door that would open by itself. When the dream house opened, a bunch of home security cameras were added, and we would watch them while waiting for the show on the ring to drop the guests off at the front yard. Debbie liked to walk the ring when no one was around. Tamara would occasionally reset between shows really odd and make direct eye contact with the employee working the doors. There was so much more. It was a near daily occurrence. Sandy Shark 903 responded with, I heard that she can be heard telling people to be careful. And the original poster said, I've never heard that, but it would not surprise me. And in this post, they included a picture that a friend of theirs took in that basement under the place where Debbie was crushed. And I have to say, it's pretty scary. I'm sharing it on the screen with you. It's creepy. I also tried to find photos of what the wall looked like, and I was able to find some of the ride being dismantled. I'm so visual, I had to kind of figure out what exactly happened, but even looking at these photos gave me the creeps. I don't know what it is. I just really got freaked out, and when I was reading these stories, I told my husband I started to feel really weird. Just so you know, that ride was closed in 1988, and the animatronics, well, of course, they didn't want to go to waste. They were reused in Splash Mountain, mainly in the Zippity-Doo-Dah riverboat scene, where the birds were now all separated. They used to be together in America Sings, and now they've been planted in new spots along the water shore. Well, there have been reports that the singing birds felt unsettlingly aware, not only of their surroundings, but the people, sometimes staring directly at guests in the boats. And that's not what they were designed to do. And as most of you know, Splash Mountain has been transformed into Tiana's Bayou Adventure. But there have definitely been claims that when the animatronics had essentially witnessed what happened to Debbie, and they're now placed inside Splash Mountain, the haunting began. They were moved then from Tomorrowland to enter the Critter Country, where a lot of paranormal activity has been reported. One woman named Eliza Bashaw swears she saw the ghost of Walt Disney himself. Once she retrieved her photos from the ride, she posted them on Facebook saying that back in 1993, there she was having a very pleasant day at Disneyland. The weather was nice, there wasn't a big crowd, and she, her father, and her stepmother decided to go on Splash Mountain. The three of them get on one of those logs, and as they're getting settled in, they notice a man has boarded into the front seat, kind of out of nowhere. He wasn't in line with them. He never turned towards them and stayed eerily quiet the entire ride. And if you've ever been on Splash Mountain, you're usually not quiet. But he wasn't even moving. He just sat there with his back straight and his hands on his thighs. Once they completed the ride, they decided to get their pictures, which she said she doesn't usually do because honestly, the prices are crazy. But that's when she noticed something. The man had Mickey hands on, like gloves that looked like Mickey. She thinks to herself, okay, to each their own, this is Disney. Some people go all out. But then after posting the picture online, other people started to notice the uncanny resemblance to Walt Disney himself. Same hairline, same mustache. He was even wearing a 1930s denim shirt. Another poster was more freaked out by what they thought looked like the devil's face right next to them. And there's more. Oz Rocks Your Socks said, a friend of mine used to tell me about the malfunction stories of tomorrow at Interventions, the old America Sings building with an infamous death, the one I told you about. He told me stories of how the animatronic would go off script, make movements when it wasn't supposed to be, and just always act up. One in particular which freaked me out was that one of the animatronics was in the middle of speaking to the audience with the whole spiel, but then stopped, dropped its arms, turned, stared at a cast member for a solid 5 seconds before all of a sudden going back to the normal script. He also told me about the phones at Space Mountain ringing with no one on the other end. Okay, see, that's creepy, for sure. The phone ringing thing, that would freak me out. Now, there wasn't a death on Disneyland's Splash Mountain, but there was on the ride at Walt Disney World in Orlando, Florida. Someone on Reddit shared this story. I worked at Walt Disney World Splash Mountain for a few years. According to legend, there's a ghost at Drop 3, the little one that goes into the laughing place where someone was killed back in 2000. Sensors giving high water readings when the level is normal, a really creepy vibe, shadows on the security cameras with no source, etc. Late one night, we were on an extended downtime. We were all spread throughout the ride path, ready to power back up as soon as maintenance gave us the word. We were chatting on the ride phones to pass time when we waited at our locations. And then there was this young cast member waiting at Drop 3, and we decided to tell her all about the ghost. She eventually got so freaked out that she had to ask a coordinator if she could go wait at Drop 2 so she wouldn't be alone. Now, nothing happened, but we sure did have a good time scaring her. They also added, when I'd walk the track before opening in the morning, the Briar Fox in the finale, where the gator gets him, would move, even when the animation was shut off. Everything would be still and silent except for that one figure. Not supernatural, I don't think, but creepy as all get out. So that death she's referring to happened to a 37-year-old man. His name was William Pollock. He was at the theme park with his friends and they decided to ride Splash Mountain. And halfway through the ride, something completely unexplained ended up happening. While seated in the back row of the log with other passengers, Pollock suddenly climbed out of the moving boat. There was no emergency, no malfunction, and then within seconds, he was struck by another log and suffered fatal blunt force injuries to his chest. This incident happened in an area that was not fully visible to ride operators, meaning there was no immediate way to stop the ride in time. Guests nearby didn't fully understand what they had just witnessed, and the ride was shut down shortly afterward. The investigators later ruled it an accident. It turned out that he had told his friends in a passing log that he had gotten sick. And as the log slowed down, he tried to cross to the other side towards an exit when a log started up again and one hit him and he was pinned underneath. One family was screaming for help. They were stuck there with each log hitting them from behind, crushing this man more and more. Children witnessed it, including one that William had even spoken to. It was a little boy. He said that he was just trying to get across. And that's when he was using the log in front of him as a stepping stone. It is sad, but Splash Mountain has been the source of many weird happenings. There was a whole article about this animatronic fox that supposedly addressed this guy named Ryan by name and told him that he was going to marry his dad. Yeah. According to this account, he said that the fox said to him, "Now's our chance to set a trap for Briar Rabbit." Then it turned, looked right at him in the eyes and said, "I'm going to marry your dad, Ryan." Then the fox leaned in real close to his face. And he said, "I'm pretty sure it wasn't programmed to do that." And he said, "Call me Mrs. Dad, Ryan. I'm going to be your dad's bride at his wedding." Before he could say anything else, Ryan floated away from him to enjoy the rest of the magic, as he put it. I'm not going to go any further down that rabbit hole, or shall I say foxhole. And ironically, this was on clickhole.com, which I'm not really sure is that reputable. Still creepy though, especially the pictures on that post. There's also legends of Tom Sawyer Island, which is adjacent to where Splash Mountain is located. Apparently, back in June of 1973, there was another tragic death at Disneyland. An 18-year-old named Boglin Delora was visiting the park with his family. They came all the way from Brooklyn, New York. That night, he and his 10-year-old brother Dorian were on Tom Sawyer Island as it was closing. Instead of leaving with the crowd, they made a split-second decision, jumping a fence and hiding behind the burning settler's cabin. They were thinking they could avoid getting caught and stay a little bit longer to have some more fun. As hours passed, and it was now 9:30 p.m., the island was empty, and it wasn't exactly what they expected. They were in the dark, and they were scared. Realizing they needed to get back, they panicked. They didn't want to call for help and risk getting in trouble, so they made a very dangerous choice to try to swim across the rivers of America. The problem was, little Dorian, he couldn't swim, so his brother Bogdan carried his younger brother on his back and stepped into that dark water. About halfway across, something went wrong. Bogdan slipped beneath the surface, and he didn't come back up. Dorian, who again is the younger of the two, was alone in the water, somehow managing to keep himself afloat, and he doggy paddled in the dark until a passing staff boat spotted him and pulled him out. By then, Bogdan was gone. Search crews, including security and local authorities, spent the entire night looking for him. His body wasn't located until the next morning. It was lodged between rocks near the island. The family later filed a lawsuit. They argued that the attraction encouraged risky behavior, but the Walt Disney Company was ultimately cleared of any wrongdoing. But the story still lingers. Cast members over the years have shared quiet, unsettling feelings around the rivers of America at night, especially near the island, describing it as a heavier area, different after dark. Of course, nothing proven, nothing official, but for some, it's never just felt like water. Some cast members say that at night, when the island is closed and the texts are on there setting up for phantasmic, sometimes one will feel somebody tugging at their sleeve, like a little kid. And they'll even hear them ask, "Can you please help me find my mommy?" But when they turn around, no one's there. To me, that's probably the freakiest feeling. But that's not all. I took to Reddit once again and found a post from just 6 months ago. The poster wrote, "I've told this story before, but when this topic comes up, I share. I want to preface this by saying I didn't believe in ghosts when I first started working for Disneyland. About 2 weeks after starting, I had a shift that ended 15 minutes after everyone else, so I had to walk the park alone because no one wanted to wait for the new guy. So now it's 1:45 in the morning, and I'm walking on stage in front of Splash Mountain looking at my phone. As I'm right in front of the Splash Mountain entrance, I look up the hill, and I see a little girl in what looks like a First Communion dress. It wasn't shiny or anything like that, so I just thought it was a girl that was maybe lost, 7 or 8 years old, and I look around to see if there's any other cast members that can help me because I'm panicking, trying to remember the protocol for lost kids since I was still so new. I'm walking towards her as she's closer to the entrance to the Davy Crockett canoes, and I'm closer to the entrance to Winnie the Pooh. I called and asked if she needed my help or if she's lost, and she still has her back to me. As I get closer, I look around again, thinking how upset I was at security for not clearing the area of the park and leaving me with this mess. We are maybe 20 yards away from each other as I look to the left and then I look to the right for any help. And as I look forward again, I see that the little girl had ran towards me, but I didn't hear her footsteps. And I can tell that she's going to run into me and we both might fall. I wince and I brace for impact, but it doesn't happen. When I open my eyes, the little girl is gone. And I looked around for a little bit, but decide this isn't my problem anymore. Security can do their job right. I didn't think anything of it until a week later when I had an opening shift with one of my leads who had been with the resort for 20 years. I hadn't told anyone about this because I thought I might get in trouble for leaving a guest lost in the park, especially a kid. I began probing by asking her, "Have you ever seen anything weird at night?" And she responds, "Did you see a girl in a white dress?" My blood turned to ice. My stomach dropped. She had described everything that happened without knowing it happened to me. Turns out, the Splash Mountain Attractions cast members and Haunted Mansion casts all have similar stories, and some of the older cast would share their knowledge. Apparently, there was a little girl that everyone called Mary. She loved Tom Sawyer's Island and Haunted Mansion, and that part of the park in the early 70s is where she would visit. But she had leukemia, and when she passed away, her parents spread her ashes on Tom Sawyer's Island. Evidently, the parents told a Haunted Mansion cast member many years afterward that they had done this. But by that time, many cast members in the area claimed to have seen a girl in a white dress walking on the island. Okay, I had told you in one of my other videos about seeing a woman in a white dress out in Key West. Well, this story reminded me of that one. But I wanted to know more about this Mary person, but it was before the internet, so there wasn't too much besides what the poster already wrote. I did read that many cast members have said that they can see her walking through the trees or sitting alone by herself by the water or just lingering at the entrance to Splash Mountain or right when you get to the Haunted Mansion, but that she's pleasant. She's just revisiting her favorite place. It's probably one of the most prominent ghost stories that are shared among people who work there because she's been seen so many times. A commenter on Reddit, Albracho2000 said, apparently there's a child ghost found to roam around Critter Country and Haunted Mansion, and an old lady ghost in the Winnie the Pooh ride. I can somewhat attest to the child ghosts for something I experienced a few years back. It was already way past closing time, and I was walking out of Galaxy's Edge through Critter Country. I stopped to use the restroom found under the Hungry Bear restaurant. I went inside, and there was only one person in there. I proceeded to use the urinal, during which the temperature felt a lot colder. I went to wash my hands, and I kid you not, I heard footsteps, as if someone was running, and the door in one of the stalls slightly opened on its own. I also heard faint laughter of a child. I ran out without even drying my hands to my wife, who was waiting for me in one of those tables found in the dining area around the restrooms. I explained to her what happened and asked if she saw anyone go into the restroom after I did, to which she didn't. Okay, that is terrifying. The laughing children I've heard so many times associated with hauntings. But now I wanted to share some posts I found that I thought were worthy of sharing as we close out. Rebecca McMorgan, MUA, said, I have a good Haunted Mansion story. I was a French maid and hostess on the mansion for about 2 years. I was also trained on pirates during my time in the attractions. I'm not sure if some of you heard the backstory about a little boy who passed away and his ghost supposedly haunts the ride. Anyway, one night, I was positioned at the loading area. Typically, there are 2 cast members positioned at load, one at the front of the moving belt and one at the back to make sure that all the buggies are closed and locked before they embark on their journey. But on a very slow night, only one cast member stays at load while the other one takes the elevator up to retrieve the next group of guests to bring them down. On this particular evening, I was the cast member to stay at load alone, while the other one went up to bring the next guest down from the foyer. It was taking a while for them to load the next group because it was during Phantasmic, and the guests were just trickling in. I was finding ways to amuse myself while waiting, walking in place on the moving belt, watching the buggies creep by, becoming sort of mesmerized by the howling of the ride soundtrack, when suddenly I hear a child sneeze. The sound came clearly from just beneath the incline where we store wheelchairs for handicapped guests who are riding the attraction. There's an exit door there as well, but the door leads to a stairwell that is rarely used unless a guest changed their mind and wants off or were evacuating. The hallway leading to the stretching rooms was completely empty, and they were still at the top waiting to load them completely. I walk over with my flashlight to investigate, and I see nothing. So I make my way back to the belt, and within a moment, I hear the child sneeze again, followed by a sniffle come from the same place. This time, the hair on my neck is standing straight up, and I decide not to go investigate again. To say the least, I was creeped out until the next cast member came back down with a load of guests. Thankfully, it was my turn to bump to the next spot on the rotation. Good times. Okay, a child sneeze. That's probably the equivalent of hearing a child laugh. But to know that they went there, they checked, nothing was there, and they still heard it, but no one was supposed to be down in that area, that would definitely creep me out. Abe Fagata, 76, said, "There used to be a big grand hotel in California Adventure. One Halloween night, it was struck by lightning, and 5 guests who had the misfortune of being in the elevator disappeared without a trace. For years, it was said you could see the ghosts of the guests in the hallway, followed by bolts of lightning. Guests riding the elevators frequently reported unexpected drops, and eventually, Disney shut it down. Today, that hotel has been gutted, and the exterior is used for the ride of Guardians of the Galaxy." Okay, that does sound creepy, but then again, wouldn't we know if 5 whole people went missing? So I didn't look into that one, but now I'm feeling like I need to go digging. But have you ever heard of Mr. One Way? Well, Untimely Lord posted about him. There's supposedly a ghost that sits next to single riders on Space Mountain. Now, I've heard about a ghost in Haunted Mansion, but that's like actually part of the ride. And trust me, there's so much lore around that. I could go on for hours. But what this poster said is that on Space Mountain, he will seem like a regular single rider that sits next to you, may even talk with you in line. But at the end of the ride, after the photo flash, there will be no one sitting next to you. There's a bunch of Disneyland ghost videos on YouTube, as others have said. Offhand, Disney has several of them. I didn't look, but I'll link that below if you want to check it out. And then someone who has since deleted their Reddit profile said, "I've rode with him before. As a child, maybe 12 years old, he would talk to you. He looked clean cut, red hair, looked similar to the main guy in Band of Brothers, and looked like a guy from the 60s. I was at Disneyland by myself. This was in 2002. My sister had a cheerleading competition that I didn't want to go to, so my dad got me a 3-day Disney ticket. I talked to Mr. One Way. I told him I was by myself, and it's hard to get around Disneyland when you forgot your glasses. I don't remember what else he talked about with me. I just remember him being very nice. Going through that part where they take the picture, I screamed, 'This is fun, right?' I looked next to me, and he was gone. We didn't even get off the ride yet. I didn't think he was a ghost until someone told me about Mr. One Way." Okay, that's freaky. I kind of like the idea, though, of a nice spirit. Maybe just wandering around. Don't want you to be alone, but then again, is it better to be with a ghost? This next one is really freaky to me, and I don't really know why. But a commenter said that above the firehouse in Walt Disney's old apartment, in the window, you can see a lamp on. When Walt was alive, everyone knew when he was in the park because he would turn that light on in that window and turn it off again when he left. Then after he died, the light was turned off, but somehow it turned itself back on again. Everyone believed this was Walt saying that he was still there, so they left it on ever since. Even during COVID, when the park was closed, the lamp supposedly stayed on. If there are ghosts at Disneyland, Walt himself is most definitely one of them. He didn't build that park to just leave it behind. Yes, and it seems like there is some confirmation that maybe his spirit still lingers. But didn't they have his head frozen for the future? Like he's going to be put back on a body later on when we have that technology? I don't know, but that's creepy too. Red Atomic actually gave a list of creepy happenings and where. Number 1, in the Emporium. Cast members, himself included, say they've experienced their names being called, only for no one to be present when they look around. Custodial have reported hearing noises and seeing figures when they're closing late at night. Number 2, Candy Palace. The basement is notoriously haunted. During my time there as a stalker, I heard noises when I was completely alone. Stuff had also fallen from the shelves. Cast members on stage had reported being touched or having their clothes pulled on. Number 3, Disneyland Hotel. One cast bathroom has a flickering problem with the lights and also allegedly has a shadow man that will chase you out. People have straight up quit their jobs after being chased out of this bathroom. Number 4, the entry poster tunnel closest to City Hall. On some occasions, you can smell cigar smoke, despite smoking being banned in company property. That's an indication of Walt's spirit being present. A commenter, Captain Rex, said they had experiences at Autotopia at night. There's a position near the off-road area of the track by Matterhorn where a cast member needs to be stationed at all times. Cars used to derail there constantly. And after the park closes, you're not allowed to leave until all the guests have cycled through and another cast member comes by in the very last car to come pick you up. So on some nights, for the last 15 or 30 minutes after the park closes, you essentially have dead silence outside of the Yeti roar and some of the guests driving by every minute or so. Sometimes it's very peaceful and you can just take in the ambient Disneyland sounds that get picked up by the wind. Other times it can get creepy because it's after midnight when most of the guests have gone home and you're out there all alone with your ears playing tricks on you. Other cast members have mentioned a car park ghost near the fountain, but I can't speak to that. Well, I would like you to speak to any experiences that you have had. Has anything like this happened to you while visiting Disney theme parks? I don't have a ghost story, but I did follow my iPhone for hours on Find My iPhone, thinking somebody had stolen it when I accidentally misplaced it on one of the garbage cans in Disney World. Only to find out I was actually following my phone as it made its way on a conveyor belt underground in the tunnels in the Lost and Found. You can just imagine me yelling and thinking somebody in front of me had my phone every time I saw it stop. Poor me, I know. But I did end up getting a call at 3 o'clock in the morning at my hotel after inquiring about my phone being missing, and I was able to retrieve it the very next morning. Not scary, so I'm going to defer to all of you in the comments. And I will see you in my very next video. Bye.